The man moved fast for his size, 230 pounds of muscle and cruelty crossing the parking lot in 6 seconds, and the boy never saw him coming. Marcus was 7 years old, and he was carrying a backpack shaped like a dinosaur, and he was looking at his shoes when the hand closed around his arm and yanked him sideways into the van. The door slid shut. The engine turned over, and by the time anyone on the street had processed what their eyes had just seen, the white van was already gone. The woman who had been standing 40 feet away watched all of it. She did not scream. She did not run. She stood very still, her coffee going cold in her hand, and her eyes tracked the van until it turned the corner and vanished. Then she looked at the empty space where her grandson had been standing. Her name was Eleanor Voss. She was 61 years old, and she had gray hair and reading glasses hanging around her neck on a beaded chain, and she was wearing a cardigan the color of autumn leaves. She took one slow breath. Then she walked back to her car. Before we go any further, if this story already has you, hit that subscribe button right now and stay with me until the very last word. Drop a comment below telling me what city you are watching from. I want to see how far this story travels, because what happens next, I promise you, you will not want to miss a single second of it. Eleanor Voss looked like someone's grandmother because she was someone's grandmother. That was the entirety of what most people saw when they looked at her. The cardigan, the reading glasses, the silver hair cut short and sensible, the small frame that had shrunk half an inch since her 40th birthday. She bought her groceries on Tuesday mornings. She kept a garden. She made a chicken soup that her daughter had been trying to replicate for 15 years without success. What most people did not see, because Eleanor had spent 30 years making sure they did not see it, were the hands, calloused in specific places that no amount of gardening explained. The way she sat in any room with her back to a wall and her eyes on the door, the way she moved through a crowd like water, taking up no space, drawing no attention, always knowing exactly where the exits were before she had finished walking through the entrance. Her daughter thought she was just careful. Her son-in-law thought she was a little paranoid. Her grandson Marcus thought she was the best person in the world at finding hiding spots during hide-and-seek, which was true, but not for the reasons he imagined. Eleanor had spent 22 years as a Navy SEAL intelligence operative before anyone was officially calling women that. The paperwork said she was an analyst. The paperwork was not entirely wrong, but it was not entirely right either. She had been in Kandahar in 2003. She had been in Mosul in 2007. She'd been in 3 other places that she would not name even now, even to herself, in the privacy of her own thoughts, because the habit of silence was the first habit they had built into her, and it was the last one that ever left. She had retired 8 years ago. She had meant it. She was sitting in her car now with the engine off and her phone in her hand, and she was looking at the license plate number she had read and memorized in the 3 seconds the van was visible before it turned. The corner. She was thinking about what she had seen in those 3 seconds. She was thinking about the man's build, the way he moved, the slight list to his left shoulder that suggested an old injury. She was thinking about the partial logo visible on the van's side panel before the grime obscured it, a red stripe, commercial vehicle, local registration by the look of the plate prefix. She was thinking about her grandson's face in the moment before the door closed. He had not cried. He had looked at her. 7 years old, and he had looked directly at her across 40 feet of parking lot, and his face had said what his voice could not, and Eleanor had looked back at him and let him see what was in her eyes. She dialed a number she had not dialed in 4 years. It rang twice. "I need a location pull on a plate," she said. "Right now. No questions." The voice on the other end paused for exactly 1 second. Then, "Send it." There was a man named Darren Cole who had decided 3 weeks ago that Eleanor Voss's son-in-law owed him a significant amount of money. The son-in-law, a man named Patrick, who sold insurance and coached his son's soccer team, and had absolutely no idea how to handle a person like Darren Cole, had made several poor financial decisions over the past 2 years that had brought him to the attention of people who operated in spaces that Patrick had never intended to enter. Cole was not the top of that particular food chain. He was a middle rung, experienced enough to be dangerous, arrogant enough to make mistakes. Taking the boy had been his idea. He had been proud of it. He had leaned back in his chair when he proposed it and spread his hands and said it was clean. It was simple. It sent a message that no adult conversation had managed to send. His two associates, a man named Garrett who was large and not particularly thoughtful, and a man named Luis who was small and somewhat smarter but not smart enough, had agreed that it was a good idea. None of them had seen the woman in the cardigan. None of them had thought to ask whether Patrick's mother-in-law was anyone worth considering. Cole was in a warehouse on the eastern edge of the industrial district, 17 minutes from where he had been when he made the call to take Marcus, and he was feeling comfortable. The boy was sitting in the corner eating chips from a bag Garrett had produced from somewhere, and he was not crying, which Cole found faintly annoying because a crying child would have made the phone call to Patrick more efficient. He checked his watch. He would give it another 20 minutes and then he would call. He did not hear the car pull up outside. The warehouse had no windows on the north side. He did hear very faintly the sound of the side door. Garrett was closer to it. Garrett turned, hand already moving toward the weapon at his hip, and the door came open and the woman who stepped through it was small and gray-haired and wearing a cardigan the color of autumn leaves, and she was holding nothing in her hands, and her expression was completely calm. Garrett almost laughed. "Lady, you have about 10 seconds to explain what you think you're doing here before I—" "Marcus," Eleanor said without looking at Garrett. She was looking at her grandson across the warehouse floor. "Come here, sweetheart." The boy stood up immediately, chips forgotten, and started walking toward her. "Hey." Garrett stepped to block him. He did not finish the step. What happened next took 4 seconds. Eleanor had counted on 3, but Garrett's bulk required a small adjustment. Luis had been faster than she expected, which meant she took a hit she had calculated as avoidable. The edge of his forearm caught her left cheekbone, and she felt the sting of it and filed it away and dealt with Luis, and then there were 2 men on the floor, and neither of them was getting up quickly. And Marcus was standing 18 inches from her grandmother's hand. She took his hand, she turned toward the door. Darren Cole was standing between her and it. He had his weapon out. He was pointing it at her with both hands, and his face had gone through several expressions very rapidly and had settled, unfortunately for him, on anger rather than the fear that would have served him better in this moment. "You don't know who you're dealing with," he said. Eleanor looked at him. She looked at the gun. She looked at the distance between them, 11 feet, and she looked at the angle he was holding it, and the slight tremor in his left wrist that told her about his nerves and his experience level, and what he would do if she moved, and what he would do if she did. "Not. Marcus," she said quietly. "Close your eyes and hold on to my hand. Okay, Nana. Don't open them until I say, okay." She looked at Cole. "Put it down," she said. Her voice was the same temperature it had been when she ordered her coffee that morning. "You have one opportunity to do this and walk out of here with nothing broken. I would take it. You're a 60-year-old woman in a—" "I am," she said. "Put it down." Something in her eyes stopped him. He could not have explained what it was. It was not aggression. She was not threatening him, not posturing, not performing anything. It was simply the absence of the thing he was used to seeing in people when he pointed a gun at them. There was no fear. There was no calculation. There was just a woman standing very still, holding a 7-year-old's hand, waiting. His hand lowered 3 inches before he caught himself. It was 3 inches too far. She crossed the 11 feet before the hand came back up, and the gun was on the floor, and Darren Cole's wrist was bent at an angle that produced an immediate and sincere reconsideration of his life's choices. And she was looking down at him, and her voice was still completely level. "Where is your phone?" she said. "My phone," he told her. She took it with her free hand. She stepped back. She looked at Marcus. "You can open your eyes." He opened them. He looked at the 3 men on the floor. He looked at his grandmother. "Are we leaving?" He said, "Yes." "Did you hurt them?" Eleanor considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. "A little," she said. "Okay." He tightened his hand around hers. "Can we get ice cream?" She looked at him for a moment. Something moved across her face that was not quite a smile, but was close enough. "Yes," she said. "We can get ice cream." They walked out through the side door into the afternoon light. Behind them, Darren Cole was sitting against the wall, cradling his wrist, listening to the sound of a car engine starting and fading away. Garrett and Luis were beginning to move. No one spoke for a long time. The police found all 3 of them 20 minutes later after an anonymous call to the tip line. The call had been made from Cole's own phone. The information provided was specific, accurate, and comprehensive. Locations, names, financial records, Patrick's situation laid out in language that would make the prosecutor's jobs considerably easier. Whoever had made the call knew things that required access Cole could not account for. He spent a long time trying to figure out who had been in that warehouse. He never got closer than the cardigan. Patrick received a phone call from Eleanor that evening. She told him that Marcus was safe, that the situation had been addressed, and that he should expect a call from a Detective Harmon the following morning regarding his financial entanglements. She told him to be honest and to get a lawyer. She told him she loved him and that they would not be speaking about the specifics of the afternoon's events, ever, with anyone. He tried to ask her what had happened. "We got ice cream," she said, and ended the call. That night, after Marcus was asleep in the guest room with his dinosaur backpack on the floor beside the bed, Eleanor sat in the garden in the dark. The air was cool. The neighborhood was quiet. She could hear, very faintly, the sound of her grandson breathing through the open window above her. She sat there for a long time, in the dark, in the quiet, saying nothing. Strength that has been put away does not disappear. It waits. It waits in the hands and in the eyes and in the long, steady breath of someone who has learned that silence is not absence. It is preparation. The world sometimes forgets the women who built themselves in hard places, who came home and put on cardigans and grew gardens and chose ordinary life on purpose, with full knowledge of what they were choosing it instead of. It forgets them until the morning it needs to remember. What was taken from Marcus was his safety, his certainty that the world would hold still long enough for him to grow into it. What was given back to him was something he would carry longer than he would remember the afternoon, the knowledge somewhere below words that the person holding his hand knew exactly what she was doing. That kind of love does not announce itself. It simply shows up. It simply brings you home. And when the moment asks for everything, it gives everything quietly, completely, and without a single wasted word.